Okay. Now, one of the major changes, which just kicked in this year, is that UC Berkeley actually now launched a brand new College of Computing. So just to note here, so this is now its own separate college, right? So Berkeley used to be kind of interesting in the fact that they had two different versions of computer science. They had the electrical engineering and computer science major, or EECS, that was housed in their College of Engineering. But their College of Letters and Sciences, the main college, also had a computer science major that was, for many, an easier pathway to be able to graduate with a computer science degree. No longer, right? So Berkeley just added this new college. And what we're predicting here is that because there are a lot more people applying to this new college, it's going to be much more selective than applying to the overall College of Letters and Science. Now, there are also, in addition to computer science, two other majors that are going to be included into this, and that's data science and statistics. So, which makes sense because those are also the two most popular majors that people would apply to and then try to change to computer science from. Right. So Berkeley sort of figured out that many people were trying to use those two majors as strategy majors, and they just kind of like lumped them together. So we're anticipating that, of course, it's probably not going to be as low an acceptance rate as the College of Engineering, but it's going to be really close. Right. So then it does pose an interesting quandary then in terms of like, do you apply to Berkeley and then apply for either this new College of Computing and also the engineering school and just go for high risk, high reward? Or do you go for, one of those two options and then maybe apply for something in the College of Letters and Science that's not computer science related, knowing that you may not be able to change to one of the computer science majors? Okay, so it's definitely something that the answer to that question will vary from student to student based on whether or not they find value in just an overall Berkeley degree if they can't major in computer science, or whether or not the only reason they would consider Berkeley is for their computer science education, of course. Okay, so as I mentioned, this pretty much precludes the use of a strategy major now. You can't just major in something from College of Letters and Science and then change to computer science. They've sort of cut off that little loophole right there. The acceptance rates are predicted to be very close to that of the College of Engineering. So you're looking at maybe 3 or 4%. So it's going to be really hard to get into. Okay. And as I mentioned, this is effectively a direct admit program for computer science. It used to be that only the EECS major was the guaranteed computer science major that you got accepted to as a freshman. This is now another one of those as well. So for Berkeley, both computer science majors are in effect direct admit. Okay, so one of the key things when you're considering trying to get into one of these direct admit programs is that applying early makes a difference for colleges that do have an early action option. So unfortunately, Berkeley doesn't have EA, but for certain colleges like Purdue, UIUC, the University of Minnesota, for instance, these are all schools that do have direct admits for computer science, and they also have an EA option. One of the key things to note here is that a huge percentage, right, over 90% of the incoming CS freshman class were accepted through the EA route. Okay, yes, there were more too, and that, is noted here in terms of the acceptance rate, but only 101, that's only a 4% of the entire incoming freshman class for computer science came from regular decision, which obviously made it much more selective. Okay. So that's definitely something to think about. If you are interested in applying for one of these schools that's good for computer science, apply early. Okay. All right. Now, before we get to the next one of the things I would want to recommend, though, is to, if you're open to it, you might want to consider thinking outside the box. I think one of the reasons why these direct admit programs have, in large part, become so competitive is that there are rankings like produced by US News that rank like, oh, top 10 undergraduate computer science majors, right? Or computer science programs. And so everybody just applies to these same exact schools. You might find tremendous value in schools that are maybe a little bit less highly ranked, or perhaps even go for schools that are not technically on that ranking system. Like there are certain liberal arts colleges, for instance, like Harvey Mudd or Olin College, or even colleges that are not necessarily exclusively for engineering, like Swarthmore College has an outstanding computer science program. And those often go under the radar because most people don't necessarily think that they would be that strong for computer science, right? But they actually are, and many hiring managers in, let's say, in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley are aware that these students from these colleges are actually very well qualified and very well prepared. In fact, I think there's certain companies that give like a CS test to new applicants. And I think there was one article, think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, that actually said that graduates from Wash U St. Louis, which is not normally known for CS, schools like Johns Hopkins and Swarthmore are actually some of the highest scorers in that entry-level CS test, right? So, you can find tremendous value looking outside of these very common like direct admit programs that everybody's applying to. Okay. I mean, yes, sure, you might still want to consider applying to some of these, but you would benefit tremendously by looking outside the box and trying to see if there are other programs that might also benefit you. Okay. All right. So my update number 4 for today has to do with this notion of character. Ever since the Supreme Court decision came down, colleges have been sort of re-examining how they, want to select certain students. Actually, even before the Supreme Court decision, to be fair, right? There's a lot more emphasis being placed now on whether or not the student is of good character, right? So this has changed in recent years. So as you can see here, of course, grades, test scores, if they're submitted, are still the most important considered ones. But positive character attributes, right? Being a good quality person and citizen and student, right? Are definitely things that colleges are looking for. And that's very closely tied to your personal statement, your essay, because that's one of the things that they look at, right? So in fact, if they were to look at places where they can find your character, of course, the essay, the personal statement would be the main place they look at, but they will also consider things like your recommendation letters, the nature of your extracurricular work, like do you do a lot of volunteering, for instance, or are you a leader at your school? And of course, if they offer an interview, that could be yet one more platform where they can find out a little bit more about your character, what your values are and what you believe in. Okay. So these are all now pretty important. Now, one of the key things is that, so what does that mean exactly? What is character, right? So in these various surveys, it's been gleaned through these various surveys, like this one is from Harvard, for instance. They surveyed various admissions people, and they found certain traits, for instance, in the annual NACAC survey, where they value such traits as resilience, service, curiosity, perseverance, just to name a few here. Others like compassion, gratitude, grit, growth mindset. So in essence here, they can be kind of, I guess, categorized into two main camps. One, are you ethical? Are you just a good person, right? So things like, are you compassionate? Do you do a lot of volunteering? And then two is, how do you deal with setbacks, right? Basically, like, how do you perform under pressure, right? So do you have grit, resilience, or diligence, right? Are you hardworking? Are you definitely someone who stays cool under tough circumstances? Those are all things they want to find out. Okay, so how do we demonstrate this then? So how do you demonstrate your character? Well, the essay is obviously the most logical place to do this, right? So your personal statement in the Common App is your face to admissions committees, right? And in most cases, the admissions officer will never meet an applicant in person. So the essay is the perfect place for you to articulate who you are, what you stand for, and just in general, something about what your personality is. So these essays are evaluated in many cases, not just as a writing sample, right, to show how well you articulate your thoughts, but sometimes they almost like psychoanalyze this. They take a look at this and say, like, what can we figure out about this candidate as a person, right? So that is an important thing that they try to deduce from reading your essay. So when you're selecting which topics you want to write about, it's probably good to have a goal in mind. I typically tell my students that you want to reverse engineer this essay. You want to first plan out, like, what do I want to share about myself? What are some really good qualities about myself that, my friends or my teachers see in me that I want to demonstrate to the college, right? And then try to find a narrative that basically demonstrates this trait or this quality about yourself. Okay, so it's not just the personal statement now that colleges are looking for character. Ever since the Supreme Court abolished the use of affirmative action, there have been a slew of changes, right, to like these supplemental essays. And this is in large part because one of the Supreme Court justices, I think it was Justice Roberts, who basically said something like, oh, well, you could still consider race, but you can look at it on an individual basis based on their essays. You cannot just admit someone just because they're an underrepresented minority, based simply on that fact. But if they had to deal with adversity or challenges because of their race, then the essays would be the perfect platform to do that. And unsurprisingly, as a result of this, of course, many colleges decided to change their prompts. I would say just a rough estimate right now is about maybe 1/4 of the top colleges have, in fact, overhauled their essays, in some cases pretty drastically overhauled their supplemental essays from last year in order to include some new essay prompts. And so while I'm not going to necessarily go through all of them, I do want to share at least some major categories that I see, right? So some overarching kind of themes that they're trying to look for in these supplemental essays. So for one, we have essays that ask you about your background and what potential contributions you can make to these universities. So here's an example here from Harvard. So it says, Harvard has long recognized the importance of enrolling a diverse student body. How will the life experiences that shape who you are today enable you to contribute to Harvard? So, of course, looking at this, it's no surprise that this prompt is there because it actually gives a platform for someone who's, let's say, for example, an underrepresented minority, for them to speak about race and how that might have, added to their development, their life experiences, of course, and talk about that in terms of how they might add diversity to college, right? But it doesn't have to be about race per se, right? I think one of the good things about these prompts is that they're worded in such a way to be very broad, okay? Your life experiences don't necessarily have to be entirely through the lens of race, right? So if you have some interesting life experiences, for instance, like you're very well traveled, or you've engaged with people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, or you're very big on volunteering, or you're very musically inclined, these are all things that you can add to the diversity of the campus beyond just simply race, okay? Stanford has a similar prompt, right? So one of the things they changed from last year, I think they kept all their prompts except for this one. So they asked, please describe what aspects of your life experiences, interests, and character would help you make a distinctive contribution as an undergraduate to the Stanford community. So of course, it maybe adds a little bit more because it's not just the life experiences, they say your interests and your character. So, but like the theme is the same, right? You would most likely even answer these the same way, in fact, right? So the good thing about this is that if you recognize certain themes in these college essays, you could probably save yourself a lot of time and energy by just writing a base essay that you can just adjust for each one of these, because oftentimes you're going to see prompts now that are kind of fairly similar, right? Another major sort of thematic category here has to do with like dealing with adversity. Okay. So one here from Columbia asks, students are often challenged in ways that they could not predict or anticipate. It's important to us, therefore, to understand an applicant's ability to navigate through adversity. Please describe a barrier or obstacle you have faced and discuss the personal qualities, insights, or skills or insights you have developed as a result. Of course, this could be any adversity. Of course, if you, let's say, for example, are an underrepresented minority and you had to deal with things presumably like even as extreme as racism, this could be a form of adversity you can deal with, okay? But not every single form of adversity necessarily has to be one that's more high stakes or very, very like impactful in a way. Even if, let's say, for example, if you lived a fairly sheltered life, I mean, we all face different levels or types of adversity. I think just as important is showing how you grew from this adversity, right? So even if, let's say, for example, in the grand scheme of things, your adversity wasn't necessarily as bad as maybe some other students, it doesn't mean you should avoid writing about it. You could still talk about something in which you've grown from the process of dealing with hardship or challenge or adversity, okay? Now, of course, I will caution you though, this is probably not the place where you're going to want to talk about like how you got to be, early in the year and you had to work hard to get an A, just because there are some drawbacks to that. It might make you sound very grade obsessed, right? Think of other things in your life, I would say, right? So look into other places, maybe interpersonal conflicts or just, other challenges, maybe through your extracurriculars. Don't necessarily rely on just like academic challenges per se, unless it's worth noting, right? MIT has a similar prompt as well about like something that didn't go according to plan and how did you manage the situation. And then lastly, there is a final theme that I've seen here in terms of these new essay prompts that ask you about how do you deal with people who might have different perspectives or viewpoints than you do. Okay. So Yale, for instance, now asked a new prompt, reflecting on a time you discussed an issue that is important to you with someone holding an opposing viewpoint. Why did you find the experience meaningful? Okay. So that's certainly something where it is a bit of a challenge, especially if maybe you haven't really engaged with people from different backgrounds. But once again, this does not have to be racial diversity, right? People can have different opinions than you, right? It could be across the political spectrum. It could be things like different religions. There's certainly socioeconomic backgrounds for one, right? There are a lot of ways that you can engage with people who might hold different views than you do, right? And the important thing is to show that you are open-minded, that you respect the fact that other people have viewpoints that differ from yours, even if you don't always end up agreeing with them, right? I think that's really important to show that mindset because college will be a very diverse place. Okay. Colleges want it to be a diverse place because that's part of your learning process in college is dealing with people who may not always share the same viewpoints as you do. Okay. Caltech, has a similar prompt. I'm not necessarily going to get to that tonight. But these are prompts that you can, like, if you're looking at all your different college essays, a smart move would be to look for things that fit the same general umbrella and then plan using the same aspects of your life experiences to go ahead and answer them. Okay. All right. So the last major update I have for all of you tonight has to do with the use of AI. Obviously for the last year or two, the big thing that everybody keeps talking about is Chat GPT, right? Is AI going to take over everything, take over jobs or whatnot? Is AI or Chat GPT going to be used for all sorts of stuff? And not surprisingly, there have been discussions even among admissions people about the possible use of AI in admissions. So some of the things I've seen in terms of admissions articles and podcasts where they discuss these things, plus based on the feedback that we heard from national conferences like NACAC, for instance, with AI being used in so many different industries, now college admissions offices have even considered possibly using AI. In some cases, maybe to do even things like initial screenings, to do an initial rating of an application. That's obviously fraught with all sorts of possible problems and potential, ethical issues, perhaps, right? So there's been some debate on that. One of the dangers of that, of course, is that this might tempt some college admissions offices to try to get more applications, right? It's already bad enough as it is, but if they start using AI, they might feel like, oh, we can handle more applicants now, right? So that's going to be a trend that we want to see. Hopefully, they don't use it this way. I mean, yes, it's very demanding on an average admissions officer to have to read so many files, but it's that human process that adds more sort of, I guess, integrity to the process. I don't necessarily want to be screened out by an AI, right? I do want a human person reading my file and evaluating me, right? Next is other colleges have even considered using AI to generate prompts in the future, right? It seems relatively minor, but that could be a thing, right? But of course, the most commonly discussed one is the possible use of AI generated student essays. And so how do you safeguard against that? So I've already heard many a discussion about, like, I believe there was an article I read somewhere like where a Princeton student actually created an anti-AI tool for colleges, right? Turnitin.com has been used for many years by colleges to screen out college student essays. And certainly many college campuses have been using it already to screen for possible AI generated college essays. And in fact, what I've seen is that, yeah, so they're pretty confident in these tools where they can screen out and identify an AI generated essay with about a 98 to 99% accuracy. So, which brings me to my next point. If you are thinking of doing this, don't. Stop right there. Do not use ChatGPT to write your college essays. As tempting as it may be, as intimidating and as stressful as this process might be to you to, like, staring blankly at your computer screen because you can't think of anything, please don't do that, right? For one, colleges are very much aware of this trend, so they will catch you. If they catch you, that's pretty much an automatic deny, right? So you definitely don't want to be red flagged as having an essay that might potentially have AI generated elements in there. Okay, so colleges are on high alert. Definitely don't use that. Even if you think, oh, I'll use it to do a base essay and I could just edit over it, they can still detect it. Okay. All right. So the other thing too is it's generally not a good idea anyway. Most AI generated essays, it lacks a certain introspection. It lacks a certain kind of rough feel for these essays. In fact, sometimes it's good to have a little bit of those tiny wrinkles that makes it feel like it's still a high school student, right? Because it's what adds a bit of humanity to it, right? So sure, they expect these essays to be thought-provoking and you have to have like an intelligent viewpoint, but nonetheless, it still should have a voice of a teenager, right? Once you lose that, if it sounds too polished or robotic, right, like an AI generated one would be, then it's not going to be a good essay anyway. It's not going to make you stand out. So it's not even worth considering, in my opinion. And then ultimately, colleges are looking for individuals who have high moral character. This is one of the themes we've already talked about. So if you're thinking about generating your own essay using AI, you're definitely not going to pass that test in terms of the character thing, right? So long story short, don't do it. It's just not going to help you. And at HS2, we firmly believe this. Okay. So we want to protect our students by making sure we talk to them about the responsible use of AI. It's definitely not something that we want our students doing. And the same goes for our essay editors and counselors, right? We've had discussions in our staff meetings about this, that we do not want anybody to use these at all, right? Even if it's just for like minor editing purposes, because the moment something is generated by the AI, there are algorithms that can pick it up. Okay. So our students are also told explicitly to refrain from using this. And we've gone so far as to actually now use our own AI detection software to be able to detect whether or not our students have generated essays using AI. Okay. So we want to make sure that this is something that we protect our students from, and we also tell them about why it's definitely not a good idea. All right. So with that being said, okay, I do want to talk to you a little bit about HS2, and then I'll open it up for Q&A. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions that you want me to answer today. So first of all, I am proud every single year of our results at HS2. As you can see here, we've gotten acceptances to pretty much most of the top universities. We've had 5 from Stanford this year, a couple from Harvard, and quite a few for the UCs and USC as well. So these colleges are getting more and more competitive, but it's a testament to the hard work of both our students and our counselors that we're still able to get students into these top schools. Of course, I'm just as proud of the students that we have who are getting into, even any UC campuses, even if they thought they were not eligible to apply to the UCs. So that's definitely something that we pride ourselves in, that we really try to maximize our students' potential and try to give them the best chances of getting into the colleges they want to get into. Okay, so since the school year has just recently started, we also have amazing teachers and tutors at HS2 Academy. In fact, one of our managers at the Fremont office just actually told me that we had 2 students. One got a perfect score on the SAT and another got a perfect score on the ACT from doing the summer programs that we have at HS2. So our counselors are great, but we also have wonderful teachers who also have extensive backgrounds in education and also graduate from some amazing schools. So both Dr. Gina Henry and Mr. Adam Mua actually were 2 of our first teachers in our Cupertino office when we opened that up like 12 years ago, and they've still been with us all these years. So we have some amazing, amazing teachers, and certainly if you do need assistance in terms of like just your help with your high school subjects, or if you want test prep specifically for SAT and ACT, we can definitely help your student, really try to maximize their results. Okay, now a couple of our key offerings this fall. One of the key things that we offer is we offer an apprenticeship, which is sort of a combination training and research internship, specifically in molecular modeling and data analysis, right? So, this would be a wonderful opportunity for students who are maybe thinking in the natural sciences to get a better sense in terms of like chemistry, for instance, because a lot of the software used in this apprenticeship are used for things like the pharmaceutical industry, but it's also because it's very, very data driven and utilizes a lot of like cutting edge software, still possibly very useful for students who are interested in things like computer science or data science or statistics statistics, because this would give them an opportunity to have a broader application to those skills that they're developing through computer science, right? So this is definitely a wonderful opportunity. It's also a great opportunity for students who are maybe still a little younger in high school to give them a head start, because these could be great resume experiences that you could use to hopefully land an even more competitive internship down the line, maybe in some of the most competitive summer research programs, for instance. Okay. And lastly, I also want to talk about USC's partnership with HS2, where we have something called the STAR Research Program, where students can actually engage in doing research right at USC itself. Right. And so we've already had some of our students go ahead and attend this previous summer, and we've already had a couple of students published, right? So they've already been able to do research and have the research that they conducted in the summer published in a journal, right? So this is definitely a great opportunity. I think in large part because it's also at USC. So if USC is your dream school, this is going to look tremendous in terms of your applications. But I also want to say that like being able to do research affiliated with a university, doing things at the university itself is far more valuable than, let's say, for example, just doing something like impromptu with like a professor somewhere, because oftentimes the quality isn't necessarily there, right? So it's research, but all internships or research aren't necessarily created equal. Sometimes some of those research things that are just arranged with individual professors may not necessarily be rigorous enough to look competitive for college application processes. So this one, though, is definitely something that will make your son or daughter's application stand out more, because it's most certainly going to be very rigorous. The students will spend a lot of time in the laboratory and really get a lot of research experience. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to end slightly early today, but hopefully this gives me more of a chance to go ahead and answer a lot of your questions.